Thanks for staying with us on the conversation. In the first half, we dealt with situations in Kenya where opposition Raila Odinga has claimed that the government of William Ruto is illegitimate despite the Supreme Court ruling that the elections were free and fair. And now we cross over to other stories where Cameroon's government has denied reports and it has asked any foreign country to mediate in its ongoing conflict with separatist groups in the country's English-speaking regions. On January 21, Canada's Foreign Ministry announced that it had accepted a mandate to facilitate a peace process between Cameroonian authorities and some separatist factions in the Anglophone regions. However, the Cameroonian government has stated that it has not given any foreign country or external entity a role as mediator or facilitator to resolve the crisis.
Now, the separatist movement in Cameroon stems from a perceived marginalization of the English-speaking community by the French-speaking majority since a 1961 plebiscite fused both parts of the country into one. The conflict has resulted in thousands of deaths and displacement of nearly 800,000 people, with many schools closed, leaving 600,000 children without full access to education. The 2019 national dialogue aimed at resolving the conflict did not bring about a resolution. Now, join us to discuss all of this and more. We have Agha-Nwi, security analyst, who joins us from Bamenda in Cameroon. We also have Metuge Stanley, a journalist who joins us from Boya in Cameroon. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with you, Agha-Nwi. What do you make of the Cameroonian government's statement denying asking Canada to mediate in the Anglophone conflict? And this morning, the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs did release a statement saying that, the Cameroonians did ask for them to mediate. So was there an error in communication? Who's right here? Can you help us paint the true situation of things?
Thank you very much for that question. I personally feel disappointed that the government made that outing, rejecting the Canadian mediation. But I also kind of felt confused because I asked myself that, does it mean the government wasn't consulted earlier on before Canada made that statement? But knowing the credibility that Canada has on the international scene, and in its position, its reputation as a country on its own, I doubt that the Canadians will go ahead and make that kind of statement without pre-mediation arrangements going on behind the scenes. We understand, we've been made to understand that for 4 months, there have been meetings taking place in various Canadian towns like Toronto, attended by representatives from the Cameroonian government and representatives from the separatist movement. So it's really surprising, disappointing, and confusing to hear that the government issues a statement saying that they are not part and that they didn't ask any foreign entity to intervene. True that Canada wasn't mentioned in that communique, but then it's all confusing.
Okay, I'm going to cross that question to Metuge. I mean, do you actually believe there was an error in communication from both parties? I mean, we were seeing that there have been mediation efforts in Canada. So was there an error actually?
I think it's a very dicey situation because before now, Canada cannot come out to make such a claim without them having authorization from all the parties involved. Of course, this crisis has been going on for the past more than 6 years now. And if Canada is coming up at this time with such a claim that they are struggling to bring on board all the parties, to seek for lasting peace in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, I think there is some iota of truth. But again, the government of Cameroon, being a sovereign state, they too want to defend their stand and not want to make it seem as if Canada is imposing the meeting on them. I think that's what the government is trying to do right here, maybe trying to play the safe game. And I think that it's not helping us because before, when the news came out from the Canadian Foreign Ministry, we were very happy. Most Cameroonians were happy that at long last, we're going to have a mediator that will bring both factions on board to solve the issue. So personally, I think it's there was a meeting, and if the government is taking the stand of saying that there wasn't any agreement for Canada to go ahead to mediate, I think indeed is the billion-dollar question that we expect to see in the days ahead.
Thank you, Metuge. Now back to you, Agha-Nwi. As a security analyst, can you give us a detailed explanation of the historical and political context that led to the current crisis in Cameroon's Anglophone regions? And also, how have the demands of the Anglophone Separatist group evolved over time, and how do they differ from what the government wants? What's the government proposing?
Yes, basically the crisis initiated. The crisis started as a result of protests carried out by. Initially, we had lawyers and teachers complaining about their respective marginalization in both domains. The teachers were complaining about the fact that Anglophone schools were flooded by French-speaking teachers, and the Anglophone educational system was gradually being assimilated. And the lawyers, likewise, were complaining about the common law system, which is the Anglophone unique judicial system, was gradually being eradicated and replaced by the Francophone system. And this led to protests on the street, but unfortunately, these protests were met by police brutality, and this created or caused a lot of frustration, not forgetting the fact that for years, Anglophones have been complaining about how marginalized they are and how the government is gradually assimilating them to become Francophones and gradually erasing all what Anglophones have as their identity. So, coupled with what happened to the teachers and the lawyers, civilians went out for a massive protest in 2016, and unfortunately, again, these protests were met by armed brutality from the police and from the military. And after this, after 2016, after the protests in October 2016, eventually some groups decided to take up arms and protect protect themselves and also protect their territory, what later on evolved into what we know today as Amazonia. So this is not something that started today. It has been existing since the 1960s with our forefathers or with our fathers complaining about how the government was gradually erasing everything that Anglophones had as an identity. And today it has evolved into this full-blown war. And yes, the government says that measures have been taken, but what kind of measures? What we have seen are kind of political cosmetic fixes, which have had no real value. In 2019, as rightly said, there was a national dialogue, which was not attended by most of the separatist fighters, the hardcore separatist fighters, because they were not really sure about the genuinity of the government's invitation. They saw it as a platform where they could be arrested, and so most of them did not come. And the government coordinated and controlled these talks, and at the end of the talks, we had a series of resolutions, some of which have been implemented but have had no concrete solution. And let me just rapidly list some of these things that the government has done. The government has created DDR centers, the disarmament and de-radicalization centers here in the northwest and in the southwest, wherein they're inviting separatist fighters to drop their arms and come out, and to be rehabilitated and rather reintegrated and later reintegrated into the society. But that hasn't been effective. The government has granted special status to the two English-speaking regions, that is the northwest and the southwest regions. That equally hasn't been effective. And so that is all the measures taken by the government so far have not been effective.
Okay.
And I think it's
All right, I want to bring Metuge into all of this. I mean, we're looking at marginalization of this English-speaking state now degenerating into the formation of militant groups. Now, Amnesty International has said that this militant groups has caused, or rather committed lots of atrocities. I want to know what exactly is the local sentiment on the ground, and do you actually believe that the government has just been making political statements to resolve this marginalization of the Anglophone countries or the Anglophone states?
I think the government is trying. Since we had a major national dialogue way back in 2019 in Yaoundé, for all Cameroonians, especially those from the north and southwest region, to come together and see how they can chart their way forward. Since then, we've seen the government doing great strides on the field. But again, as they'll tell us, the government machinery grinds slowly, but again, surely. Thus far, we've been able, just like what Fru has highlighted earlier, we've had the DDRO Center, which is a center to readmit the separatists into the society. We've seen the creation of regional councils. We've seen the creation of this effective decentralization, which is what the government has gone in for, effective decentralization, meaning that they are empowering the local communities, the local councils, to have more power to carry out development, especially at the grassroots level. Now, talking about the sensation or the feeling of the separatists, or better still, the local population vis-a-vis the separatists, I think it's time that the population have woken up, and they're doing everything possible to report cases of assaults, because at first it used to be the separatists fighting for the local population, but again, in recent time, they have turned their back against the local population, kidnapping for ransoms, killing people, maiming people, and it's been a very, very dicey situation. And the population right now has done everything possible to report cases. In case they see a separatist around their locality, they'll report to state security officials who will intervene, and why not arrest them. And the government has also given an olive branch to all the separatists to surrender voluntarily, so that you can receive the clemency from the President of the Republic, and from there you get yourself into the DDRO Center for rearmament, and why not for subsequent intervention. So at the moment, a town like Boya, or the southwest region where I'm based, is enjoying relative peace, because the population has stood their ground that they don't want any bloodshed, because one life lost is one life too much.
Thank you, Metuge. Now, Fru, just before we wrap things up, I know you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, but what do you think the possible scenarios for peaceful resolution of this conflict would involve? What would it take to bring about lasting peace to the Anglophone regions? What are the key factors that will determine the success of the peace process and long-term stability in the Anglophone regions?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, withdrawal of troops from these regions. I think that will be the number one determinant of peace.
Rebel troops or federal troops?
I'm talking about the government troops, because the rebel troops are there because the government troops are there. The rebel troops are retaliating against the government. So if we have if an end is put to the current military solution, and of course a third-party mediator is brought on the table, because contrary to what the government says, that we are a sovereign state and we can solve our problems, that is not true, and that is not possible. Because you cannot, when two children in the house are fighting, you cannot say, okay, one of them should be the one to bring the solution. No, a third-party involvement is mandatory. So what Canada is doing is really, I think, a step in the right direction. And I would really call on the Cameroonian government to give this a chance, because they already backed out from the Swiss-led mediation, and they shouldn't do the same for the Canadian phase.
So quickly, before we go, how would you address the issue that Metuge raised about those rebels that are meant to be protecting people, you know, kidnapping them for ransom, maiming them, killing them?
Those are the fallouts of war. Those are the fallouts of war. And maybe people, they don't think that it one day happen, but when you have armed people in the society, things like that are bound to happen. And yes, for the fact that they should be called to book. But I also insist that if the military is taken down or the military is taken out of these regions, it will make it easier to put an end and to control separatist groups.
All right, thank you so much, Agha-Nwi. Of course, we'll look at both international cooperation into resolving this crisis, and of course, what the regional organizations will also do to assist in solving this crisis. We'll have conversations continuing on this in our social media platforms. Thank you so much, Agha-Nwi, security analyst who joins us from Bamenda, Cameroon, and of course, Metuge Stanley, a journalist from Boya, Cameroon. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.